the context around budget, sort of, Iowa Finance 101, just to sort of calibrate everybody and set the stage for how Iowa school finance works. And then we're going to jump quickly into actual challenges that we face as a district as it relates to budget moving forward. We'll talk a little bit about enrollment and the implications of enrollment on our budget, as well as some forecasting for the next 5 years. So one of the aspects about this budget that I think you will find different than in previous years is the team worked really, really hard in the last few weeks to make sure that we are actually projecting and forecasting out for 5 years. It makes a lot of sense, obviously, to discuss the challenges heading into FY27, but it makes even more sense to discuss the context of FY27 with FY28, 29, and 30 in mind, so that we are intentional about the decisions that we make in FY27 and their implications for FY28 and beyond. So what you will see tonight is, again, that context around how Iowa school finance works, how we're proposing that we make decisions as a district, as a board in FY27, but also looking at future years and what our budget holds at that point in time as well. So we'll talk also about a lot.
And Shashank, I just want to say thank you. I know this is something that we really asked for and pushed, and I know it's not easy. So we really appreciate you putting in the extra time and energy to take a first pass at it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And so we're excited about the conversation tonight. And for any questions that you have, we'll do our very best to answer them. But if we don't have answers, we'll come back with answers the next time when we meet. So just want to offer that up, and we're looking forward to your feedback so we can improve our process and what we put in front of you so that we can make the best decision possible for our kids. So with that being said, Shashank.
Thanks, Matt. So a little bit of a change in the way that we have presented budget to the board and the community. We want to talk about what the context is, what are the challenges that we are facing, what choices we need to make, and what is going to be the impact of that on our budget. So what is the context that we're talking about? Is that too far off?
No, I'm okay. I just feel like I'm blocking the view for anyone in person. Okay.
So basically want to share what the budget timelines are for the whole process from November to April. What exactly is the legal requirement to adopt and certify the budget and spending authority? Then we'll get rolling into what the challenges are, the enrollment trends, the way it has been going south for some period of time, and what the impact of that on the financial statements are. Our forecast and what the key drivers are, and the forecast is sort of for a period of 5 years. And what is the path to a balanced budget? What kind of choices we are making to make it into a balanced budget? And then there'll be a brief introduction to staffing standards, and that will be covered more in details in the next budget session, and then discussions and questions. Matt, anything to add?
No, other than just a sort of preview for you when we talk about forecasting and key cost drivers. Our mindset is around what are the key cost drivers that are static year to year, right? Staffing, health insurance, things like that. And you'll see some key cost drivers later in the slide deck that will be there every year. We just need to talk about how we might look to make adjustments there or not. Another key cost driver, for example, would be our reserves, right? When do we use our reserves and when do we not use our reserves to spend down, and how do we leverage that to balance the budget? So there's several sort of key cost drivers in that light that as we're thinking about the budget moving forward, that we use them as a sort of static frame to make sure that we know when is the right time to actually, if you will, turn the dial on these key cost drivers versus turn it up versus turn it down in order to balance the budget, but also to meet goals articulated in our strategic plan.
So what is the budget process and timeline here? So the budget is basically structured around the 4 choices that we said. Timeline is November to April 26th. And multi-year forecasting, as I had said. So let's jump into the timelines. So November 18th, which is today, we are talking about the multi-year budget overview with the key drivers and assumptions. and the 5-year forecast for that, and brief introduction to staffing standards. Next meeting, we'll go into details talking about staffing standards. We'll also talk about the Reimagine Education and the GEO bond, which just got approved. Kudos, 74% of the residents voted in favor of that, as well as the PEPL and SAVE. December 9th meeting, we'll talk about the federal programs, which is the title and other things. Curriculum adoption. This is a significant cost, as you would see in 5-year projections, that we are making an investment based on our strategic plan. We'll give highlights about the ELL, special education, and DOP. The intent of starting from from PEPL, SAVE, all the way to federal program, curriculum adoption, ELL, SPED, DOP is we will have the functional experts, the subject matter experts. It is not going to be just a finance presentation, so that we can share what exactly is the federal program used for, how much are we spending down, same thing with curriculum, and all the other things. So it's not going to be a pure number-related discussion, even though it is part of the budget. This year, we have changed it a little bit. Till last year, we were talking about goals and guardrails as a standalone thing. We're going to integrate that with our strategic plan. So as part of the discussions on Jan 6th, 20th, and February 3rd, we'll be talking about the strategic plan costing related to goals and guardrails and other investments. And we'll also talk on Jan 20th, the Diploma Plus and Signature Schools. So most of the cost-related discussions, our hope is to finish it by February 3rd meeting. Now, does that mean the budget is approved at that time? No. So let's go to the next slide. February 17th is when we set the dates for budget hearing. So we'll have in the work session, we'll share with the board what is the proposed property taxes for the district. Our enrollment has been declining, and there is a slide which I'll share later on. That would trigger the budget guarantee once again for our district. The first time we had it was when we had the pandemic and we lost over 1,000 kids. Based on the reports that we have, we are losing close to 650 students for FY27. The board has to approve the budget guarantee, and the budget guarantee is funded from property taxes. It is part of the general fund component. Then we will submit the proposed tax notice to the Department of Management, and we'll send it to the publisher on March 10th. On March 10th, we'll also have a comprehensive budget overview. From this time on, any questions which the board has, they can always ask us, they can always forward it to us, but this is probably the last time that we'll really be having overall look at the budget. The tax notice will get published on March 13th, and the first public hearing will be on March 24th, which is a board decision. And then we send it to the publishers, which is published in the Des Moines Register on March 31st, and we'll adopt the budget, or the proposal to adopt the budget will be published on April 11th.
And can you share, sorry, the overlay, the rough timing of contract negotiations? Has that general time period been discussed yet?
That's prior to May 15th, is that right? Is that, or April 15th?
Maybe.
May 15th. So the general timeline for contracts is May 15th. So this would precede that.
March.
So
Well-
March
15th, yes.
15th.
Yeah.
So the last public hearing would be a month after.
Got it.
Yes.
May I ask about the public meetings and videos that you push out, and then the feedback form that we have for public questions and answers, and when does that happen?
So, Kim, and I know Matt and myself have not discussed, and Matt, jump in if you feel differently. Last year, we had 5 sessions at the different high schools. The attendance ranged from 1 person to, Rosie, maybe 7 to 8 persons at best. So what we decided was we will have a virtual presentation for the community to really jump in and then provide their feedback to us. And if we are having the overall budget overview by March 10th, we can do it anytime between February 17th and March 10th. We can have that session for the community, but it's going to be a virtual session.
And that will be recorded and posted, and then we'll still have that
Mhm.
online
Q&A.
collection of questions and, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Marie, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions before I keep rolling? So what is the legal and financial requirements? The first and foremost is the budget must not exceed the spending authority and must be balanced. Property tax rates need to be set. And what we really set is basically the general fund management, petrol and pearl. Now, general fund is a formula driven thing. Petrol and pearl is set, so we don't really make any changes to that. Management fund is the only rate that we have some flexibility on. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is school finance is complex. We have revenues which come from different sources like state aid, property taxes, sales tax, federal programs. And we spend money based on how the funds can be spent under the various rules and guidelines. So just a slide which may help over here, and I'll go back to the other slide before. So if you see the funding source, which is the, and if you look at state aid, so state aid is the source for majority of the funds for general fund. And the fund account, which is on the road too, are the different funds that the district has to maintain. But the general fund also gets money from property tax levies and also from federal funds, which is what I had shared 2 slides back. So that is the basic flow. So capital projects, which is largely SAVE and the GEO bonds. We don't have GEO bonds, but with the approval of our GEO bonds, we'll be having discussions based on cash flow projections, how much of bonds are we going to actually issue? So that will impact the rate. And the other source for the debt service would be, so basically property tax levies is where the funding is going to come from, and SAVE is from sales tax. So those are the 2 sources for SAVE and GEO bond. So this is the structure. And then if you see in the last row, uses of funds. So the operating funds can be used for those specific diagrams that we've listed below, whether it is staff salary, utilities, computers, books, supplies. Capital projects can be used to enhance the school buildings, but again, laptops can be purchased either from here. We typically purchase it from SAVE over here or from Petrol and Pearl, which is the special revenue fund, where again, the computer logo is made, and the buses from capital project. So very, very siloed finance. We have certain sources from where we get the revenue. There's certain funds it goes to, and there are only certain things we can spend the money on. And this is very structured. I'll come at it at a later stage, that if we have money sitting in one fund, it actually requires board approval before we can transfer money from one fund to another fund. So that is something which we need to be mindful of. I skipped on this slide. I'm coming back on it. So what do we mean by the requirements of budget adoption and certification? We cannot exceed spending authority limit. What is spending authority? Spending authority at a very high level is our revenue less expenses. So if we are earning $100, our revenue source over here is $100, which is the row 1. They need to be higher than the expenses that we have, and whatever is remaining is the spending authority. Spending authority is both the current year spending authority and any cumulative savings that we have had from previous years. So it's a cumulative amount, and that cumulative amount should be less than the expenses that we are incurring for the year. The big watch out for us on spending authority is that it cannot go negative at a cumulative level. Otherwise, the superintendent and the CFO have to go to the DE to present a plan as to how we can bring it back to positive. And there have been districts in Iowa which have been in that situation. In a layman's term, spending authority can be explained like a credit card. You have a balance of $100,000 sitting in your bank, but your credit card limit is $20,000. You can only spend $20,000 on your credit card. You cannot spend $100,000, even though you're sitting with $100,000. So spending authority is like the credit card limit.
Shashank, can you go back? Spending authority, that is the summation of funding sources or? Yeah.
So I could, so if we go over here to the slide that I'm showing,
Mhm.
the source of spending authority is state aid, property taxes, federal programs, and fees. That is the revenue source for spending authority.
So it's everything except for sales tax?
Correct, because sales tax is a separate item by itself.
Okay.
So
And
sales tax,
also like philanthropic dollars, right, Shashank?
yes, it is. Thanks, Jenna. Yes. That money is also coming over there. So sales tax is the 1 cent from the 7 cents that we pay when we purchase anything is given to the districts, that 1 cent based on student enrollment. And that, if you see in this particular chart, is what is coming under capital projects, under save. That is what it is, as far as that 1 cent tax goes, which was approved, I think, in 1990 or whenever it was approved, long time back. And this is used to purchase buses, improvement of capital buildings, computers, laptops, technology, those kind of items. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
And that's why I said, school finance is complicated. So this is where I was, okay. So that was spending authority. Budget, as I said, must be balanced, which is revenue plus fund balance needs to be higher than the budget for the year. And then the board has to set the property tax rates. So these are the levies which have to be set, which is general fund, management, PEPL, PEARL, and debt service. We have not had debt service. We have not had geo bonds. The last time we had that was in 1989, 36 years back. Enrollment, trends, and its impact. The biggest source of funding for the school district is student enrollment. We get dollars per student, and with declining enrollment, this makes it very, very challenging for our district. If we see at this slide over here, this gives you a snapshot since 2018, 19, 24, 25. How many students were being served? So if you see there's a drop from 32,000 to 28,600, so almost 3,400 students served have declined. This is the belly buttons or the butts on the seat, whatever we talk about, which equates to almost $27 million. These are the number of students who are attending our schools have reduced over the 7-year period. The OE-in, which is the open enrollment in students residing in other districts who are coming to our district, if you see over that 7-year period, is more or less flat. Whereas the OE-out has increased significantly from 1,600 to 3,000. So it's almost doubled. The net impact of OE-out, OE-in is almost 2,200. And that equates to $17.5 million. And if you see the graph on the right-hand side, we have tried to show students served and the amount of OE, and the line graphs shows both in, which is kind of flat, the green line, and the out, which is declining. I'm sorry, growing. So that is the net thing which is really hurting our district. And one of the strategic goals that we have landed on is the net OE in and OE out. Matt, keep me honest over here, by 2030, we want to make it zero.
Correct.
So that means basically the net impact of 808 and 3000, which is almost 2,200 students, we need to get back in the next 4 years.
Right, so this is a sort of an opportune moment to sort of plug in. This is exactly why it's critical that we pass the bond, right? This trend of loss of enrollment for the last many years, the bond gives us our best opportunity to interrupt that trend and actually begin to reverse it and begin to grow our student body and student enrollment as opposed to the trend loss that we've had over the last many years, right? Creating these programs and doing it in very specific locations and at specific grade levels allows us to maintain and retain students and ultimately actually recruit new students back to our district.
In another way to put it, the decline of 3,378 students or 3,400 students is almost equivalent to 2 of our high schools. So it's massive.
Well, can you, sorry,
Is it-
go on. Can you explain a little about, so the OE in and the OE out, are those full-time students? I guess the question I'm getting at is, are there students from other districts that attend DMPS specific programs?
Full-time. So these are students, say, living in West Des Moines
Mhm.
or Johnston, attending our schools. That is what OE in is. So the way the process works is twice a year for the OE in, we invoice those districts. And we say we have X number of students from your district. And then they will verify that and make the payment. And same thing for OE out. Those other districts will invoice us. So we have historically spoken about the last column over here, which is called the certified enrollment. So we get the money for certified enrollment, but we have to pay out the students who are OE out. And we get the money for OE in. So the total students who are actually attending our districts are the students which are served.
So these are like full-time equivalents, but the question I have is if there is a student that is an Ankeny public school student that attends Central Campus, how is that reflected in these numbers?
Portions. Well, it goes to actually, we're showing 808, but the actual number could be 807.65.
Okay,
So fractional is also taken into account.
okay.
So I just want to add 2 historical things for the board since I will not be here after the next meeting. One is that just a reminder, and Skylar, I don't know if you knew this or not, but that in 2022, I think is when the governor, or 2021, we used to be able to allow students not to leave our district, and you can see the numbers in that as well as the voucher program. So those are impacts that I think we were a little uncertain of when I came on the board, but you can see that those are exponentially growing in usage as far as enrollment out. So I just want to caution the board. And I think the other thing is I remember when I had my first budget presentation, Shashank, we had the OE out equivalent of 1 high school, and now we're up to you saying 2 high schools. So I just I think this is a really important thing that the board needs to look at as you go into budgeting, because it's something that's been a pervasive issue over my entire 4 years.
Thanks, Shana. So this chart, which is again related to our enrollment trend, further breaks out, which basically shows what is the OE and special education students out, and then the growth in the charter schools out. So from 11 students to 229 students in 24-25. So it's almost 220 students have gone to charter schools in the last 3 years. The other thing to highlight is what Jenna was just talking about, the voucher thing, ESA. As the cap limit has been increasing year after year, and now there is no cap, anyone earning any amount of salary can get those dollars from the state. The ESA numbers have increased to 3,100. Last year was 2,242. So almost 873 students who will be taking advantage from last year to this year. And the number was very comparable to that last year, 861. Because there is no cap now as far as the limit goes. Huge, huge changes. So what are the enrollment projections? The last that we saw for FY 27, 649 students lower than last year. We are projecting at this point in time, year after year, losing 550, but we are waiting for the demographic study to be done. Once we have the results, we will true up. The caveat I would have in this budget presentation is this is round one. Numbers will change as we keep fine tuning everything over here. But this is to give a flavor to the board as to what is the general trend and direction we are heading in.
So two other aspects about this particular slide that I want to sort of interject with is the 649 number is a number, even though we have not received official certified state numbers for FY 27, this is our up-to-date calculation and interactions with the state, but we have not received the official count yet. The other thing that I want to note is that the 550 that you see, when you take the 649 and then the last several years, and you take the average, you see a 550 number is about what you get. So that's that trend is what we're actually putting out there as a forecast until we get the most up-to-date demographic enrollment analysis from our consultants. The other thing that this does not include, so this is, we're approaching this through mostly a conservative lens of saying this is, we believe this to be worst case scenario. The reason why I say that is because when you get further into FY 27, 28, now you've got the Reimagine plan taking place. We've got other, strategies and initiatives that we need to invest in. And of course, the Reimagine plan is a $265 million investment that should begin to interrupt this trend of loss enrollment. So this slide doesn't show that. That's part of the work ahead of us.
Something to note on this particular slide, you're saying FY 27, but we're using October 1 certified enrollment from FY 26. So just so the public knows, we look at October 1 of the previous year to fund the future
Right.
budget.
And so maybe just to add, thanks for that, Kim. And so just to add a little bit more to that, and we'll see it in subsequent slides. But the snapshot date of October 1st, FY 25 right now impacts our budget for next year. And so because there's going to be some, conversations around, well, how does the passing of the bond at $265 million impact the general fund for next year? And the quick answer is it doesn't, because it's two different buckets of money, number one. But number two, the bond passing on November doesn't impact the snapshot enrollment in October that happened a month prior to the vote. And so what we do know and what we believe strongly in is that this passage of the bond will impact us in years to come. It just won't have an impact on us for next year. It will be FY 28 and beyond.
So if the 649 is an up-to-date calculation, but this number could be different, would it be a lot higher or?
We don't
What do you
anticipate
anticipate?
significant change from this number.
Okay.
Just based on our interactions with the state and that constant sort of iteration of where are you at with your numbers? Because what's happening basically right now is they're just doing cleanup. Hey, we just want to make sure that the student that said that they were enrolled in another district, we do have them actually attending that school. So they're just doing cleanup right now. So we don't anticipate major changes one way or another. They're scrubbing the data.
You mentioned the demographic study. When will that be completed?
We're expecting that to be done here within the next few weeks, maybe I think early January.
So Kim, you brought a good point as far as the date of enrollment and the year in which it impacts. So I'll make it a little bit more elaborate. And just to give an example, this year, which is in process, is FY 26. The budget enrollment number of October 1, 2026 cannot be used for the fiscal year, which is already in process. So that is the reason why it is used for the next fiscal year. So the time lag is almost a year and a half. But that's a very relevant point because at times people don't connect that. Like I said, budget guarantee. So we have tried to work 3 different scenarios over here based on 2%, which has been 2.11 has been the historical trend for the last 10 years. We have taken 2%. We all know, based on the revenue estimating conference, RAC, that the funds which the state has been collecting has been declining. The amount of money that the state has been paying for vouchers is much higher than what they had budgeted. So we don't know whether the SSA is going to be in line with the 2%, which is last 10 years average. Could it be 1%? Or could it be even 0%? I only hope it does not go below 2%, because we all know that 2% is also grossly underfunding. But these are all assumptions which we wanted to share with the board at this point in time. So if the funding is based on the scenario that I presented, 3 different scenarios, the budget guarantee will kick in all the 5 years, and these are the dollar amounts that will change. So what is budget guarantee? Budget guarantee, basically the state says that if you are getting $100 in year 1 for your general fund, year 2, you should get 100 plus 1, which is 101. The largest driver, as I had highlighted, for our revenue is student enrollment. If the enrollment is declining, then we may not be in a position to get $101. So that is where the budget guarantee kicks in. That budget guarantee is paid out of property taxes. And that is what I was saying, that the board will have to certify and approve. The only way the budget guarantee kicks in is if the board approves and certifies it. I don't know a single district in the state of Iowa which would not certify. The board would not certify. So this is a little complicated concept. If I try to explain it in simple language, but if someone has any questions, please ask me about a budget guarantee.
It's intended to serve as a safety net for
Correct. So we are talking about a multi-year budget, what the cost drivers are, what are the new expenses, what are the strategic initiatives, gaps, and what are the strategies to close that gap. So let's look at FY26 budget. When we came to the board, we said this is what we're going to be spending for salaries, benefits, and health. And as you know, the payroll related cost or the staff related cost is the single largest cost, which is 80%. Then we have all kinds of other expenses, then the decentralized school funds and the new expenses. What are these new expenses of $5.6 million, which was not budgeted at the time the budget was approved? So one is on the right-hand side, if you see the column, DOP deficit, dropout prevention, which is $1.6 million. Gifted and talented. This is what we are evaluating at this point in time, whether we want to invest further amount for gifted and talented. If we do, we need to invest another $800,000. Curriculum adoption. This was not budgeted for, and this is for Open SIAD. In the elementary school, K through 5, the cost of that is $1.2 million. And then all other miscellaneous items add up to $2 million. So this is the $5.6 million, which was not budgeted for.
So again, this is
If I could
current year.
ask, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I was just going to say that this is current year. So just want to make sure that the public knows that. Go ahead, Jen, I'm sorry.
No, this is Jackie. So just on the curriculum adoption, I know we've had a lot of conversations about curriculum and wanting to understand, is this enhancing existing curriculum? Is this brand new curriculum? If you could, whether it's at this meeting or another meeting, because I know there's always a lot of sensitivity around quick changes in curriculum. So a little bit of insight on that at some point for board members would be helpful.
You bet. I think we'll be able to jump into that much more deeply in coming meetings, but I can tell you for this fiscal year, it's updating existing curriculum, particularly around that open SIAD for science curriculum. So that's the major expense in that 1.2 that was not accounted for last year when this was approved.
And then the additional question on gifted and talented is, what deficiencies had you identified to come up with this number? And is it designated for classroom
Yeah, so this was-
learning, or is it,
Mhm.
yeah?
It's primarily actually staffing. There was had an excess for the last many years in gifted and talented and had a spend down approach to that and exceeded that spend down, particularly in staffing.
And you said that you're evaluating that investment right now. In a future presentation, will you be providing that ROI?
We sure will.
Okay,
Yes.
Did you cover, Shashank, the 18 or the other expense, the 95 million? What was that?
There are a bunch of at least 10 to 12 items over there, Skylar.
Okay, could you maybe talk about maybe one of the top two? I'd imagine 10 to 12, that means at minimum, one of them is $9 million. What would be something in an other expense?
For FY 26, there is a change in health prescription costs. So there's a $10.68, which could be charged to each covered member, which is under debate and discussion. We have the Montessori curriculum material, the hiring of a project manager, or Reimagine Education, the CTE director, safety people that we have hired, part-time bus drivers. So there are a boatload of items over there. And that's why, because each of them are small items by themselves, I did not get into the
Well,
details.
when you're talking about the overall 95 million, that's what you're referring to?
Yes.
So that's even maintenance and operational cost.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Some
so
of those
that's-
sound like they're
Yeah.
other.
So for example, that's $40 million is just maintenance and operational cost.
Okay.
So you have the transportation cost, you have all those different costs which are coming. I'm sorry, I thought when you said others, I was thinking about the increase of $5.6 million, $2 million.
I think it's the fourth item
Yes.
down,
Yeah.
other expenses, 18%. And you had mentioned a project manager for.
No, that is
That
for
was-
the new ones. new
Okay, so
expenses.
that is
New
different.
expenses. No,
Okay,
that is new expenses.
okay, thank you.
That was my confusion.
So what you listed, Mr. Shashank, is part of the new expense, the
Yes.
1%?
Yes,
Okay,
the $2 million that I was talking about.
okay.
So then this non-staff indicator on the left-hand side is not necessarily an accurate statement. There are staff included in that new expenses.
Not new expenses. That is true.
Okay,
That is true. Because,
Correction of 2 million.
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the 5-year projection that we have. A big caveat for everyone is these are assumptions and they will change as the year progresses when we get to that particular year and based on the financial assumptions. So we have taken a max amount that we would ever give for salary increase. I shouldn't say ever give, we're giving more than 3%, but under normal circumstances, a salary increase of 3%. We will always evaluate it every year to see how much we need to give, but only for the sake of assumptions at a high level. If the salary is increasing 3%, the FICA, Medi, IPERS, everything related to that is also assumed at a 3% increase. The health benefits increases at a higher rate, so it's 6%. The other two items, other expenses and decentralized budget, we are talking of increase at 1%, and new expenses varies, and there's a slide which will expand on that. So this basically shows if we add up the FY 26, the total general fund expenses is going to be $544 million, which by FY 31 is increasing by almost $90 million. The single largest item which is driving that, which should not come as a surprise to anyone, is the staff-related costs, which is the total of the first three over there. Rows. But I would like to say this is just a high-level assumption for us to make a 5-year forecast. Health Health insurance, we saw that the cost over here for health benefits alone is $84 million. And over here, we are showing $75 million. The $75 million is just health cost, and then you have life insurance, you have your dental, vision, everything. Just one single item of health is $75 million cost. This is a huge cost for the district. It is almost 15% of the total cost. This covers 4,500 annual contracts. And when I say annual contracts, the different staff and the families who are covered under the health insurance. And under those contracts are the 12,300 persons who are covered, which could be the spouse or the kids or whatever. The cost per contract is $16,500 and the cost per covered person is $6,100. This is the single largest, biggest cost that the district has. There is a subset, and we have representatives from DMEA, AFSCME, and our different non-bargain groups. We are meeting on a regular cadence, basically to see what is it that we can do different over here to see that there is some kind of a reduction coming out in the health cost.
And when will that committee have a recommendation?
So the hope is by February, March, we should have something. It will not be implemented for next year. So we do have a little bit of runway, Kim, right now. We want to do something which is going to be long-term impact and something which all the parties are comfortable with.
Is HR a part of this conversation around health insurance?
Sorry?
Is HR, is Josie a part of this health insurance conversation?
Yes, she is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just think we have wonderful health insurance, but I think we currently have one health insurance option, right? Is that correct?
No, we have two options over
Two
here.
options.
We have two, but both the options are fairly expensive and very rich options because our co-pays are very small, coverage is very wide.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's one of those dials, if you will, around what turning it up versus turning it down, right? Thinking about, we've talked about even, do we add in maybe an HSA option, right? And what does that do for us?
Yep.
And so there's a number of ways that we can begin to modify this particular cost driver that would be both beneficial to staff, but also potentially save the district cost in the short term and the long run. So having this conversation now sets us up, to Shashank's point, for a little bit of a longer runway conversation, because we also know too that our health benefits is a recruitment and retention tool as well. And so we want to continue to be that
I mean,
district.
I think that's
Yeah.
data that would be really great for the board to see, and making sure now that we have a new chief of HR, what is it about? I mean, I'm asking all of our employees, what their preference is. And I just know it seems like younger people care less about health insurance and more about a starting salary. And there's a variety of other benefits perhaps they're interested in. And so I just think it is a very important part of recruitment and retention, but I just want to make sure we're asking all the stakeholders about that. So I'd really encourage the board to ask for some feedback from Josie on what is best practice as far as recruitment and retention goes and health insurance options.
Thanks, Jenna. I don't know if you can see it, but this conversation gets me all kinds of excited because I think we're all talking about the same thing, right? That there's options here and there's opportunities for us to adjust our cost drivers that benefits staff, but also benefits the organization as a whole financially. Because every dollar that we save actually goes back into staffing and programming.
Correct. You're exactly right. It's potato, right? So I agree with you completely.
And you said on that committee is DMEA, HR,
AFSCME.
AFSCME.
And you said that this report would be coming in
February.
Okay,
Every March kind of time.
so it sounds like the conversation or the presentation, the recommendation is gonna be a really good presentation, or A really good recommendation?
I think so, ma'am.
Can we make it quicker?
We can work on that. Well, to your point, because this is
I mean,
it's a major driver for us, right?
Yeah.
In terms of all of our drivers, it's the second most expensive driver, if you will,
Correct.
right? And so there's a lot of impact that we can have with this.
So this is a slide on all the new and different expenses that we have. So we basically said that in FY 27, the DOP thing, the gifted and talented, curriculum adoption is going to be huge. This adds up, if you see over the 5-year plan, which includes the Montessori as well, almost $9.1 million. And we have a separate day on which we will be talking about the curriculum adoption, which is on December 9th. So there's going to be a session just on curriculum adoption because it's such a large expense. The strategic plan,
Well, sorry if I can interrupt too, because I feel like I'm speaking to the choir, but it's important to note for anyone else that wants to join the choir that a guaranteed and viable curriculum is important and critical for us meeting golden guardrails when it comes to academic outcomes for kids. What I mean by that is that guaranteed and viable curriculum must be up to date. There are new laws have passed in the last several years that our curriculum needs to reflect. And also, we need to make sure that our students are actually being provided with relevant curriculum that is setting them up not only for life after high school, but gives them a very strong and consecrated pathway towards enroll, enlist, or be employed, right, through our Diploma Plus program. So as a district as a whole, what I would offer is that we've not invested like this intentionally in curriculum, not only just adoption to stay relevant, but being forward thinking around what are our kids going to need, specifically as it relates to the Reimagine Education Plan programming, to make sure that we've got allocated dollars in the years to come and that they are earmarked for that purpose. Because what you see in those numbers is not just about the curriculum itself in front of kids. It also has to do with the training of staff prior to the students receiving the curriculum. So it's just as important that we train staff ahead of time as opposed to training them afterwards.
This isn't the first time our teachers are hearing about this, is it? This potential
number?
5, no,
Yeah.
5 years and potentially new curriculum down. I mean, that's always an option in education. However,
Yeah, I don't know the extent to what our communication has been with teachers regarding what we're forecasting
Okay.
and when that's coming, and making sure that folks have clearly an understood sort of scope and sequence of what we're purchasing and how we're buying when and when training actually is going to come about. So our goal is to actually create that 5-year forecast that is explicit around what curriculum we aim to purchase and why then, and what the training on the front end will look like, as opposed to looking at that at the same time.
wonderful, thank you.
the other big item that I wanted to share is the $2 million, which is a flatline item year after year for strategic plan implementation. And the reason why we have put $2 million, it is more of a placeholder. We don't know what the actual cost is. The team is working on it. They're trying to find out. And then we will move forward, and also could potentially include the cost for Reimagine Education. What is it that is needed? So this is nothing but a placeholder. We did not want to leave it out. This number will definitely change. Whether it goes up or down is difficult to say.
Yeah, and what I would just sort of maybe add to that is we're in the first semester of the 5-year strategic plan, right? So we're looking at our current results and that ROI around knowing what do we need to invest in more of, less than, or sort of equal to in the years to come. So we still need some data actually to help drive that conversation.
And others, just like in FY 26, there's a bunch of different items which are going on. So this is what we are trying to show over here in case the 2% increase to SSA does happen for FY 27. The basic increase in costs, what is the decrease in expenses, which we'll share in the later slide, what we are doing for decreases. So the total budget increase is that. And then the change in funding from previous year, which is largely budget guarantee, and then the other items. So this is the total change we're talking about from year to year. So if the identified gap is $13.5 million for FY27, how is it that we are planning to bridge that gap? Some of them would be one-time changes and some of them would be recurring changes. And let me expand on that. So facility retirement and the staffing changes, which is $2.2 million and $13.3 million. Staffing changes would be covered by Josie, and she will give a little bit of a flavor today, but more in details in the next week. As we retire any facility, the staff would be placed in other open positions. And we would not be hiring new positions over there. Josie, you want to add, or Matt, you want to add?
Yeah, so what we're talking about that in staffing changes is through a new model of staffing standards, which we'll talk about in depth on a week from today, actually. But what, and we can communicate that as well then too, but this is primarily attrition. And so it's a combination of the early retirement incentive. Again, we believe 1 million is actually conservative in terms of the turnover savings that we would have in that regard of that strategy. But the staff changing is primarily attrition, and which is an important sort of distinction, right, when we think about staff changes. But the staffing standards allows us to get to a point of creating a foundation of how we staff buildings and departments at central office, looking through the lens of enrollment.
How realistic do you think 3.5 million for facility retirement is in FY27?
It's actually
Sounds really high.
Well, based on interactions with our consultants right now, it's actually closer to 3.2. And so that might be a little high, but it's right at about 3.2.
Because we don't have to do any continued maintenance or anything? It's just sale?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be well, it's a combination of, yes, it's sale. And then there would be some cost avoidance in that. That is actually not even reflected in that 3.5 that you're currently seeing. And then there's a maintenance operational savings that come with that.
So 3.5 is operational and still price.
Yes.
And then just to follow up on staffing changes, I think the board was made aware that there were positions that were hired. And I'm not sure that that was part of a broader budget conversation last planning session. So is there going to be some top to bottom assessment of the roles that have been hired over the past year or two or three to determine if those are critical positions that need to move forward? I just want to make sure there's a look back since some issues were elevated in the past few months.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can look at all positions, to be honest with you, based on, I think the short answer is yes to your question, that we can look back. I think there needs to be a more comprehensive look at positions based on our strategic plan and the goals that we have to meet. And again, beginning to adjust and maybe reallocate positions to make sure that we are funding the strategic actions articulated in the strategic plan. We have to be able to deliver on those actions. And sometimes we need to actually prioritize and restructure staffing to make sure that we get that done.
Matt, just to back Jackie up there, I really can't say enough how much I'd like to see any increases, maybe the top 3 or the top 5 departmental increases as far as staff members go, and then an explanation of why the change, and if that's going to be included in that strategic look at our resources. I think that's what I hear you saying is that's what you're going to look at and make sure that we are deploying the resources we have in the areas that we have prioritized, rather than just keeping them where they are because that's where they are. I'd like a look at the areas that have increased.
Yes, I'm tracking with you and we're saying the same thing. So we can tell you over the last several years, the increases in staffing by department and how those positions are utilized, things like that. An assessment of all of our positions, right, around their position to support the strategic actions articulated in our plan. That's the alignment piece that we need to make sure that we're creating, that there is a through line of the positions and the functions that they serve, that we are driving these actions to meet outcomes for kids articulated in our goals and guardrails. So, yes.
And Matt, I also want to make clear, and this is just, I'm just speaking for myself, and I don't know how other board members feel about this. All of this discussion has absolutely nothing to do with whether someone who is in a position today is valuable or is not. Everyone who works for the district is working as hard as they possibly can and is doing the job we ask them to do. We are reimagining education, and that means we are changing the way we do things. And from my perspective, at least, I think that merits a look at how we are positioning ourselves from a staffing standpoint. So this is not any commentary from my viewpoint on how someone is doing their job or their worth in their job, because our employees work incredibly hard for us.
Yes. Well said. Thank you, Patrick.
So the next few slides are basically based on the assumptions of if the 1% SSA happens, what is going to be the gap, and the same funding happening, and the same with 0% SSA and how we are doing it. So only if it is 0% increase in SSA, which I only hope it does not happen, we'll be a little shy in FY29 as far as the gap to close the budget deficit goes.
Yeah, so again, this is just an effort to show both the board and the public that obviously the supplemental state aid matters. And if we get 2%, that's considerably better than us getting 0%. And it's also considerably better than 1%. So it not only matters for FY27, it matters for all the years that precede that or that follow. So it is important not only in the conversation around budgeting and finance, it's also important in our advocacy and our conversation with legislators.
Turning it over to Josie.
Yeah, you want to speak to it? Thanks, Josie.
Hello. All right, so I'm here to give you a preview of what we're going to talk about next week with staffing standards. So as Shashank talked about 80%, a little over 80% of the overall operating budget is staff. And so when we're talking about declining enrollment, there's an impact on our staffing situation. So the district, when I first started a few months ago, we were working on a 5-year staffing plan. That's been put on hold a little bit so we can get some anchor pieces in place. One of those anchor pieces is what we call staffing standards. So staffing standards would align our staffing with our enrollment. So for example, it'd be class sizes is a great example of a staffing standard. So we set a max size in our the K2 classrooms. And we don't exceed that, but it allows us to predict what the staffing is going to be year over year based on our enrollment trends. So as enrollment either increases in a building or decreases in a building, our staffing adjusts to account for that. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Shashank, can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
So part of this work is reviewing our enrollment trends, not just as a district, but our enrollment trends by buildings and how that impacts our support services that surround that. So district office, all of the supports that are in place to support the overall district. So we have begun that work of strategic staffing and we are looking at it proactively. So where is our enrollment at right now? So our team did what we're calling a snapshot day. October 1st was student count day. October 1st also was our staff snapshot day. So we captured that at the same time so that we're aligned and we're talking the same numbers. So next week, we'll talk a little bit more about those staffing standards, what they look like and the layering effect that that we'll have on like what's a foundational staffing standard and then how do we layer additional supports based on the needs of the building. And then next week, we'll also talk a little bit more, I think, Patrick, what you had asked, regarding adding positions, what does that look like? How do we account for that? We'll talk about what we call it position control. And it allows us to lock in our staffing so that those additions and everything are very intentionally made during the staffing process and then not added later on. So that the board, our administrative team knows what our staffing looks like year over year and can predict those costs. Any questions for me before next week?
Will you be offering the research behind or the logic that you're using to determine some of those class sizes and instructional staff? I'm guessing that you're using a great deal of information regarding best practices and industry standards and research-based tools to identify what is the sweet spot. If I would be interested in knowing, just so that we have an understanding of, we made this decision based on what's best for students, and here's the research to back that up.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Can you hear me?
Please. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Is this different than how we've reviewed staffing in the past? I feel like in the past, we've been told there's a formula and each school gets an amount and then the school kind of makes those recommendations. Is this a different approach or is this the same approach, just you're telling it to us in a different way?
It's a bit different, and I wonder if Matt can maybe speak a little bit more to it than I can. It's been an allocation system in the past, and so resources have been allocated. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, so it is a bit different. And in previous years, the allocation was determined through, number one, through a certified enrollment count and not a student served count. It also excluded gifted and talented and special education. Those allocations were done separately and distinctly in years past. And so again, if just special education, as an example, we work with the IEP teams, right? And what the IEP team says and things like that. But even when it comes to incorporating those funding streams of staff into the overall standard, that's shifting and changing moving forward, so that we've got, to Josie's point, a foundational understanding of how we need to staff buildings and departments at central office based on enrollment. And then we do that first before we begin to layer where we need additional supports or additional staff based on needs of buildings.
Thank you.
But
Sorry.
I guess a question that doesn't have to be answered tonight, but it is my understanding that in the past, buildings have had a great deal of autonomy when making a choice about how staffing allocations occur. So will that change using this model, and how are building leaders and being incorporated into this process?
So it will change. It will change. Our plan is initially that it will change to standardize us across the system so that we can say, if you go to any of our, I'm just gonna use elementary as an elementary teacher. So if you go to any of our elementaries, we guarantee you that you will receive this at every single building. If you go to a different building and there is maybe a higher need, maybe there's higher poverty in that building and we've layered on additional support, you may see something different, but we can tell you that in all of our buildings, this is what we're going to guarantee the service delivery model provides. That's what that would do. But we have talked to principals about this, not all of them, that's coming in December. We have had conversations with principal supervisors, handfuls of directors, handfuls of principals. We've talked at executive cabinet about it. So the idea is to get as much feedback as we can to be able to make a decision that both reflects what we want it to be. So a very aspirational, this is what our staffing should be, and also current reality that we're $13 million we need to find out of staffing. So trying to balance those two is really where, we're trying to strike that balance, right now.
Yeah, the other reality too that I would offer, and we'll have these numbers specifically even for you next week, but what we've seen is that the lack of equality when it comes to a standard across building to building. And what I mean by that, we'll use elementary since we've talked about that for a little bit. We know that there are a number of elementary classrooms that are below 15. Now, when we look at research, there's no research to support that having a classroom that small actually is advantageous to students, right? Particularly if you don't change your instructional dynamic and the teaching and learning environment in that classroom. Now, you can definitely say that there's a cap on that and you can't go too large. But there is actually some research that would suggest going too small is no longer a classroom of learning. It's actually a pullout, if you will. And so we could talk about the research about that too. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is we've got situations now where in a number of classrooms, we've got well below 15 in some buildings, and we've got 28 to 29 in a kindergarten, first grade classroom in other buildings. So when we talk about the foundational sort of shift, we actually need to create, and I'm saying this word specifically, equality first, and then begin to add on layers based on building needs to make sure that the classrooms that do need to actually be below a standard are getting it, as opposed to those just based on geographical location.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing too, Kim? Our staffing standards aren't just, they're not cutting necessarily. They're standardizing across our system. So there are going to be places that it will result in reductions and moving people around. There's other places where we're going to have to add in staff in order to raise it because our standards, to Matt's point, we have class sizes in some of our secondary buildings that are quite large. We need to bring those down. And so standardizing it across the system allows us to do that. It's not just about reduction. So I don't want to completely equate the two, that one's being done because of the other, because that's not true. It's just they've come together at the same time.
Yeah, and we've been saying for close to 2 years now with the Reimagining Education Plan that regardless of the zip code that you live in, you will have access to
That's right.
world-class education. So thank you for being thoughtful.
You talked a lot about, is staff size the only factor that you're using in this equation, or are there other core fundamentals, just out of curiosity? And I only bring that up because I do feel like there are some differentiators among schools that need to be acknowledged. And like, for example, some resources, I know that there was like every school was going to have a community school coordinator, and then it was like some schools are going to share a community school coordinator. And I feel like there is times when equality just isn't the right answer. So I'm just really curious if there are some other instances where maybe resources actually need to be more allocated to other schools versus to every school equally. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe there are some schools that do deserve a 15-person class size. Like
Yeah, I think
that
that's
are
actually
lower performing schools. Maybe they actually should have a smaller class size.
Right. Yes, we agree. I think we're saying the same thing, but I think what we're saying is we need to what's the phrase? The cart before the horse? I get lost in it. It's the horse comes first. We need to create the foundational equality so that we can identify the inequities that we actually need to address with additional supports and staffing.
Okay, I'm glad there's a lens. Just wanted to make sure.
So we have shared the 5-year plan, what the budget process is with the challenges and the choices that we need to make, the cost drivers, the staffing changes that we just discussed. Now, all of this is definitely a caveat on a few things that hopefully the new costs that we are dialing in, we stick to those new costs and no new costs come into place. If they do, that'll definitely impact the staffing changes that we are dialing in. We will have more idea as we continue meeting with the board and presenting sessions as to where we are tracking on those staffing changes. So those are two big caveats I would just like to highlight as we are getting into and this is round one of the budget discussion. And as I had mentioned, there's a lot of assumptions over here. which we'll keep fine tuning as we move forward there. November 25th, if there's any clarifications needed from what has been presented today, we are more than happy to address. If you get an email in advance, it'll definitely help us to prepare. Otherwise, we will try to respond to it as well as we can. We'll cover the staffing standards. We'll cover on Reimagine Education and the Geo Bond and Pepple and Save. So that is the plan for November 25th, which is next week, exactly a week from today in the board meeting.
The goal tonight was to really sort of establish sort of the context and the challenges in front of us that include also some assumptions and some cost drivers that we're looking to turn those dials not only for FY 27 but beyond, and to establish sort of a new process, right? A process that is around that context, that challenge, but then talk about previewing like where our choices are and our decision-making points, and the impacts of those decisions for our students and for our staff and our families.
Well, thank you both. Certainly appreciate, and Josie, thank you for the presentation. And certainly appreciate you keeping it at a level that's digestible for us. Some of us do not work in this every day, but also for our community. You know, we are certainly making efforts to be more transparent with the community. And I think budget and finance is a big conversation for many of them to better understand. So thank you for keeping it at that level. I am going to maybe go around and see if there are any questions from the board members. We'll start online and then we'll end it in the room. So any board colleagues with any questions or comments online?
This is Jackie. I thank you for this. A comment and a question. How are you planning to navigate for potential cuts to federal funds? Because I know you're talking about federal funds at one of the future meetings, but does this factor in any cuts to title funds, specifically Title I? And then that's the question. And then just the comment is, as we, as a district, have chosen to invest in pre-K because we see that as a very smart investment, how much of that money is actually general fund dollars, whether it be in transportation or it be in staffing? So in essence, money that's not subsidized. And I think just it's important for the board to know what that number is as we continue to make investments in pre-K, which are outside of the K-12 general fund mandate. So that's question and comment.
So the interesting thing, Jackie, is I know pre-K is one of the legislative priorities which the district has. Unfortunately, the enrollment of pre-K is declining. From last year to FY 27, and I'm going to speak from memory, somewhere between 40-45 students have reduced, and last year that reduction was 3 students. Are we investing in pre-K? Yes. But we are having discussions whether we need to increase the investment or keep it where it is. If I had seen the trend of increasing enrollment, the discussion would have been more to invest. But I'm open to thoughts and comments.
I just want to make a comment, which is it's a legislative priority because we want the state to pay for it. I think in resource constrained environments, I just want to make sure the board has an opportunity to have that conversation about priorities, because I just want to make sure that there's visibility for the incoming board and the current board on that topic, because it's very important, but we have finite resources. Yeah, so your specific question was regarding how much of the pre-K budget is being supplemented by general fund dollars. Correct.
And so unless we know the answer, we can come back to you with an answer on that, on the very specific answer. I think your other comment was about title, and are we factoring, potential cuts that we're going to see from the federal government? And yeah, we're having those conversations, but none of that, obviously, as you know, is definitive yet, right? So we are accounting for that through the lens of knowing what we are specifically funding through staffing and or programming with title dollars, to begin to have a plan B should those funds be cut and be cut dramatically which seems to be a persistent and a consistent sort of threat, if you will.
What's the total
Wrong word.
title? Is it 81, 71 million? What's the total title dollars?
I'll have to look into the numbers, Jackie, but I think it's somewhere between 35 to 45 million dollars.
Okay, got it.
So it used to be a higher number because we had ESSER funding at that point in time.
Okay,
The other thing on federal funds is, which is a big question mark, is our state has sent a proposal to the federal about block
Yeah.
grant.
mm-hmm,
And we don't have any idea what exactly does the block grants entail. Is it the same dollars that the districts are gonna get? Or this gives an opportunity to the state to redistribute the same dollars which the state gets in some other form or fashion to all the school districts. There
Yeah.
is always.
or set priorities, right?
Or set priorities, absolutely. So
Right,
those are unknowns at this point in time.
thank you.
But very relevant questions, Jackie, thanks.
Jenna, Anna, or Patrick?
Questions
No,
for me,
I'm
just
good.
thank you.
No, I'm good. Thank you for this presentation.
None for me, thanks.
Just a couple of comments. And to echo Skylar's, comments regarding our community is looking at this. If someone were to grab this presentation without listening to the meeting, I think there's just a couple of things that could be added to the slides. If they were just looking at the presentation itself, particularly on slide 11, there's a graph or a chart there with a huge amount of information and none of your axes are labeled. I understand this chart. I don't know that everyone would without appropriate labels, so I would just offer that be added into the presentation. Along with starting on slide 14, you've got, there's nowhere on this slide to show that these are assumptions. If we get 2%, if we get 1%, I know that's kind of a theme throughout the entire presentation, but if we could just label it as such so that anyone reading this would understand that it's an if, and these are assumptions, and even in the areas where you said this number will definitely change, this is just a placeholder, let's put that on there so that we can share that with our community, please. And thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Maria?
No questions.
Thank you. And my final comment or recommendation, similar to Kim, if someone were to pick this up without knowing, I have a different slide deck, so I think this is maybe slide number 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, maybe.
Sure, okay. This is the school finance is complicated.
Yes, and it is. If there was a way to just define what each of these funding sources actually is versus, so for state aid, what is state aid versus just being in a bubble, I think would be helpful, because I'm going back now and I'm even questioning, do I actually remember? And some of them are implied, but the funding sources and then the fund account, if it could be some kind of a summary or something there, or a key, that would be helpful, I think, to the general public, and then also for reference when I look at this again next week.
Absolutely. We can absolutely do that. And that is what we typically cover in Finance 101 over there, where we define each and every fund and things like that, but we can definitely add some kind of a brief key in this deck as well.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And as mentioned again, thank you so much. This was really helpful. And I know this adds a little bit of work to what you were already doing, but I think it's well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
With that, we are actually, we're not adjourning. We are moving into 2 closed sessions. And yes, we're going to take a recess before we move into closed session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And board members online, there is a separate link that Rosie sent out for the closed session. Okay, don't join yet.
Are you taking like a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break? What time are we reconvening?
Yep, clear the room. We'll come back in 5 minutes. 6:57, Jackie. I'd now like to entertain a motion for us to go into closed session.
I move that the board go into closed session per Iowa Code Section 21.5 subsection 1, subsection C, which states a governmental body may hold a closed session only by affirmative public vote of either 2/3 of the members of the body or all of the members present at the meeting to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation.
We have a motion. May I have a second?
Nora, second.
Campos second.
Ms. Rios, could you please take the vote?
Ms. Alonso? Yes. Ms. Campos?
Yes.
Mr. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Knox?
Yes.
Ms. Martorano?
Yes.
Dr. Mayberry Mays?
Yes.
Norris?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. At this moment, I'd like to ask for the door to be closed so that we may begin our closed session.
Toronto second.
Seconded by Martorano. Is there any discussion or questions? Ms. Rio, could you please take the vote?
Yes. Ms. Alonso? Yes. Campos? Mr. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Knox? Ms. Martorano?
Yes.
Dr. Mayberry Mays?
Yes.
Ms. Norris?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0. And with that, we are adjourned at 8:54 p.m. Thank you, everyone.